The text came in at 8:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, while I was standing in line for coffee, still half asleep, still believing stupidly that my family couldn't surprise me anymore. It was from my mother, Elaine Carter. Don't come to the wedding rehearsal dinner. We've decided to keep it immediate family and important guests only. This is Ethan's big moment. We don't want to complicate things. I read it twice, then a third time. Not because it was unclear, but because it landed with a quiet finality that felt different from every other small exclusion before it. The barista called my name. I took the coffee. I walked out onto the sidewalk. And that was the moment I understood something had shifted. Before I go any further, let me say this. If you've ever been pushed to the edge of your own family and told it was for the greater good, stay with me. Like the story if it hits close. Subscribe if you want to know how this ends. And tell me where you're listening from. I want to know who's out there. My name is Hannah Carter. I was 31 years old when my parents decided I was no longer suitable to be seen at my younger brother's wedding. On paper, I looked fine. More than fine, actually. I was a licensed forensic accountant working for a mid-sized firm in Chicago, specializing in corporate fraud and asset tracing. I handled cases most people never hear about, unless something explodes in the news. Shell companies, embezzlement, quiet, white-collar crimes committed by people who smiled well and donated to the right charities. But to my family, none of that mattered. What mattered was my brother, Ethan Carter, 28, charismatic, golden, recently promoted to vice president of business development at a regional real estate company my father adored because it sounded impressive at dinner parties. Ethan was getting married to Claire Whitman, whose parents lived in a 6-bedroom lake house in Winnetka and belonged to a country club with a 3-year wait list. Claire fit. I didn't. This wasn't new. I'd learned early that there was an invisible hierarchy in our house in Naperville, Illinois. Ethan at the center, my parents orbiting him, and me, always just slightly out of frame. When I was 16, my birthday was forgotten because Ethan had a soccer tournament out of state. When I graduated college with honors, my father, Robert Carter, asked how useful accounting really was if I wasn't planning to go into finance. When I passed my CPA exam on the first try, my mother told her friends I worked with numbers. But this text wasn't about downplaying me. This was about erasing me. I walked back to my apartment and sat at the small kitchen table I'd bought secondhand, the coffee cooling in my hands. I didn't reply. I'd learned that reacting immediately only gave them control over the tone. An hour later, my phone rang. Ethan. He never called unless something was wrong, or unless he needed me to smooth something over. Hannah, he said, his voice already tired, already annoyed. Did Mom text you? She did. A pause. I could hear traffic on his end. The muffled sound of confidence that comes from knowing someone else will always clean up the mess. Look, he said, this isn't personal. Claire's parents are particular, and the rehearsal dinner is kind of a big networking thing for my father-in-law. There'll be people from the firm, some investors, judges. You know how it is. I did know how it was. I'd known my whole life. So I'm not immediate family, I said. That's not what I meant, but that is what you said. Another pause. Longer this time. You always do this, Ethan said. You take things the wrong way. I stared at the wall across from me, at a faint crack near the ceiling I'd been meaning to fix. No, I said. I finally take them the right way. He exhaled sharply. Can we not do this right now? I've got a meeting. Of course he did. Congratulations on the wedding, I said. I hope it's everything you want. I hung up before he could respond. What none of them knew, what I hadn't planned to tell anyone yet, was that 3 days earlier, I'd been assigned to a new case. It came from a senior partner at my firm, Daniel Ross, a man who didn't waste words and never handed out high-profile files unless he trusted you completely. Hannah, he'd said, leaning against my office doorway. We've been retained by an estate attorney in Cook County. Quiet matter, sensitive. The client was the executor of a family trust connected to Whitman Development Group, Claire's family. The file involved irregularities, discrepancies in reported assets, offshore accounts that didn't match tax disclosures, a pattern that suggested not a mistake, but intent. Daniel hadn't said much more. He didn't need to. He'd handed me the file and said, I want this clean. documented, unimpeachable. I'd nodded, calm, professional. At the time, I hadn't even connected the last name, Whitman. It wasn't until that morning, after my mother's text, after Ethan's call, that I opened the file again and really looked, and felt the quiet click of recognition settle into place. I wasn't angry yet. That came later. What I felt, sitting alone in my kitchen, was clarity. They'd made a decision. Public, final, measured. So would I. By noon, my mother had sent a follow-up message. Softer, more performative. We hope you understand. This is just how things worked out. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to my office, sat down, and began tracing money that didn't want to be found. There's a moment when you work in my field, when patterns stop being abstract and start telling a story. Accounts layered over accounts. Transfers timed around holidays. Assets moved just far enough to stay legal, until they weren't. By late afternoon, I knew something was very wrong inside the Whitman family business. And I knew, with a cold certainty, that the wedding my family was so desperate to protect was built on ground far less stable than they realized. That night, I received another message. This one from my mother again. Please don't show up uninvited. It would make things uncomfortable. I set my phone face down. They thought discomfort was my greatest threat. They had no idea what was coming. And as I closed the file on my screen, saving my notes under a neutral label, I understood something else, too. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was about leverage. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The first thing I learned, years ago, is that betrayal rarely announces itself loudly. It shows up as a scheduling conflict, a missing invitation, a phrase like, "This isn't personal." By Thursday, the exclusion had become official. My mother, Elaine Carter, posted a photo on Facebook. A carefully framed picture of herself, my father, Robert Carter, Ethan Carter, and Claire Whitman at the venue walkthrough. 4 smiles, perfect lighting. Caption: "So proud of our growing family. Can't wait for the big day." No tag for me. No mention. No space. I didn't feel hurt. Not exactly. Hurt requires expectation. What I felt was the steady confirmation of something I'd suspected for years. I wasn't forgotten. I was managed. At work, I buried myself in the Whitman file. It was easier than thinking about my family. Numbers don't lie to spare your feelings. They just sit there, waiting for you to notice the shape they make. The trust was structured through 3 LLCs, all registered in Delaware. Standard. Boring. But the timing of transfers wasn't. Money moved out of Whitman Development Group accounts in late November every year. Then again in March. Always just under the threshold that would trigger additional scrutiny. Always routed through a consulting entity that didn't seem to consult on anything. By Friday afternoon, I had a spreadsheet open that made my stomach tight. This wasn't aggressive tax planning. This was concealment. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling of my office. Daniel Ross walked past, glanced in, and paused. "You see it," he said. "Yes. How bad?" "Bad enough that whoever married into this family without knowing should be concerned." Daniel nodded once. "Document everything. No assumptions. We let the facts speak." Facts. I liked facts. Facts didn't care who your parents preferred. That evening, my sister-in-law-to-be, Claire Whitman, followed me on Instagram. I noticed because I rarely post. A few architectural photos, a picture of my dog, nothing performative. Her follow request sat there, blinking quietly. I didn't accept it. An hour later, Ethan texted. "Claire wanted to reach out. She feels bad about the rehearsal dinner thing." I stared at the message, then typed back. "No need. I'm busy." That was true. I was very busy. Saturday morning, my father called. "Hannah," Robert Carter said, skipping any greeting. "Your mother tells me you've been distant." I almost smiled. Distance implies movement. They were the ones who'd drawn the line. "I'm working," I said. "Well, we all are," he replied. "But family obligations matter." Apparently, not mine. A pause. Then his voice shifted into the tone he used when he wanted to reassert authority. "This wedding is important for Ethan's future, for our family's standing. We can't afford distractions." Distractions. That was their word for me now. "I won't be a distraction," I said calmly. "I won't be there. That's for the best. He hung up, satisfied. What he didn't know was that I'd already started thinking several moves ahead. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for Thursday night at a private dining room overlooking Lake Michigan. Guest list? 40 people. Investors, local judges, executives. People who mattered to my parents. I wouldn't be there, but my work would be. On Monday, Daniel looped me into a call with the estate attorney who'd retained us. His name was Martin Klein, 65, meticulous, not sentimental. "We need a preliminary report before the end of the month," Martin said. "There's a pending marriage that could complicate asset division if this goes public." Marriage. Of course. Understood, I said. Are the principals aware? Not yet, he replied. We're establishing facts before anyone is alerted. I muted my line and let out a slow breath. The truth was moving toward my family, whether they wanted it or not. They just didn't know it had my name attached. That night, I dreamed of my childhood home. The dining table set for holidays, my chair slightly pushed back, always closer to the edge. I woke up before dawn with the feeling that something irreversible had already started. Tuesday brought another message. This one from my mother, again. "Your Aunt Linda will be at the rehearsal dinner. She asked about you. I told her you weren't feeling well." There it was. The narrative. I typed back before I could stop myself. "I'm fine. Please don't say that again." 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then, "You're being sensitive." I set the phone down. By Wednesday, I'd finished the first draft of my report. It was clean, thorough, supported by documentation that would hold up in court if it needed to. Daniel reviewed it in silence, then looked at me. "This is solid," he said. "Uncomfortable for some people, but solid. That's my job." He hesitated. "You okay?" I considered lying, then decided not to. "They're getting married this weekend," I said. "The family connected to this." Daniel's eyebrows lifted slightly. "That complicates things." "No," I said. "It clarifies them." He nodded slowly. "I won't assign you off the case unless you ask." I won't. That night, the rehearsal dinner happened without me. I knew because my phone buzzed with a photo from a distant cousin. Everyone dressed beautifully. Candles, wine, my brother at the center, glowing with approval. No one mentioned me, not even in absence. And for the first time, it didn't hurt. Because while they were toasting appearances, I was holding something far more dangerous than resentment. I was holding the truth. And truths, once documented, don't stay quiet for long. As I shut down my laptop and prepared for bed, a single thought settled in, steady and undeniable. They thought the wedding was the event that mattered. They were wrong. The real moment was coming, and it wasn't going to ask for permission. Weddings have a way of making families perform, not love. Performance. By Friday morning, my parents' house in Naperville was in full production mode. I knew this without being there because my mother, Elaine Carter, couldn't help herself. She sent photos to the family group chat I'd never officially been removed from, just muted into irrelevance. Flower arrangements lining the entryway. Place cards laid out with perfect spacing. A shot of the welcome baskets for out-of-town guests, each one tagged with the Whitman family crest, like it meant something. No message, just images. Proof of belonging that didn't include me. I watched them briefly, then archived the chat. At the office, the air felt different. Tighter. Daniel Ross had closed his door, something he rarely did unless legal was involved. Around noon, his assistant asked me to step into the conference room. Martin Klein was on the screen, glasses perched low on his nose. "We've discovered additional irregularities," he said without preamble. "Your findings triggered a deeper review." I didn't respond. I waited. "There's evidence of funds diverted from a minority partner in Whitman Development Group," Martin continued. "The partner died 2 years ago. His widow is now asking questions." That caught my attention. "Has litigation started?" I asked. "Not yet, but it will. And when it does, everything connected to the Whitmans will be examined, including any marital assets formed this weekend." I nodded slowly. "So the timing matters," Daniel said. "It always does," Martin replied. The call ended, leaving the room quiet. Daniel looked at me. "You understand what this means?" "Yes." "You're okay staying on this?" I thought of my mother's text, my brother's voice telling me not to complicate things, the way my absence had been reframed as fragility. "I'm fine," I said. And this time, it was true. That afternoon, I received an email from Claire Whitman. Subject: Hi, Hannah. The body was short, polite, careful. Hi, Hannah. I hope you're doing well. I know things have been a bit awkward lately, and I just wanted to say I hope there are no hard feelings. Family dynamics can be complicated. Warmly, Claire. I read it once. Then again. Family dynamics can be complicated. That sentence is often used by people who benefit from the complication. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the message to my personal folder labeled Boundaries and returned to work. By evening, Chicago was damp with early spring rain. I walked home instead of taking the train, letting the cold soak into my coat, grounding me. At my apartment, I poured a glass of water and stood by the window, watching headlights smear into reflections on the street below. The wedding was tomorrow. I wasn't invited. That was clear. But I had been invited to something else entirely. At 9:17 p.m., Daniel texted me. Emergency filing. Tomorrow morning. Be ready. I stared at the screen. Emergency filings don't exist without urgency. I replied. Understood. Sleep came in fragments that night. Not from anxiety, but from anticipation. The kind that hums quietly beneath your skin when you know the next step will change things. Saturday morning, I woke before my alarm. Showered. Dressed in a charcoal blazer and black slacks. The uniform of seriousness. I didn't need to look festive. I needed to look credible. At 8:30 a.m., Daniel called. The widow has filed, he said. Civil complaint, alleging fraud. The name Whitman is in the head. I closed my eyes briefly. Media? I asked. Not yet, but it will be. This kind of money always leaks. And the wedding? He hesitated. It's in 2 hours. I thanked him and hung up. For a moment, I sat at the edge of my bed, hands folded, breathing evenly. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was consequence. At 10:02 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. Are you okay? You didn't respond to Claire. She's trying to be nice. I typed back slowly. I'm fine. Please enjoy the wedding. I set the phone aside and opened my laptop. By noon, the filing was public record. Whitman Development Group named. Allegations detailed. Figures precise. Language careful, devastating in its restraint. I knew exactly what would happen next. The whispers would start. Quiet at first. Guests checking phones between champagne flutes. A lawyer friend leaning in to ask a question that hadn't existed an hour earlier. The ceremony would go on. They always do. But something invisible would shift in the room. At 1:14 p.m., I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Hannah? A man asked. This is Thomas Whitman, Claire's father, I answered. Yes, I understand you work in accounting, he said carefully. I was hoping we could talk. There it was, the first crack. I'm at work, I said. You should speak with your attorney. A pause. Controlled. Measured. I see, he replied. Well, congratulations to Ethan and Claire. The line went dead. At 3:47 p.m., my brother texted, Do you know anything about what's going on with Claire's family? I waited a full minute before responding. I work with facts, Ethan, not rumors. His reply came instantly. Are you involved? I set the phone down without answering. Outside my window, the city moved on. Buses passed. People laughed. Somewhere, my family was gathered, dressed beautifully, pretending nothing had changed. But it had. The filing existed, now. Permanent, traceable, waiting. And the most dangerous part wasn't what it said. It was who knew I'd helped write it. As the afternoon faded into evening, one truth settled in with absolute clarity. They'd spent years teaching me how to disappear. They'd just forgotten I'd learned how to be precise. And precision, once applied, doesn't miss. The wedding was only the beginning. The real confrontation hadn't even started yet. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of quiet that feels earned, not peaceful. I made coffee, black, no sugar. Sat at my kitchen table and read the news the way other people read weather reports. Calm, detached, prepared for impact. At 7:42 a.m., the first article went live. Local business leader named in civil fraud complaint. No photos yet. No names beyond Whitman Development Group and Thomas Whitman listed as a respondent. But the details were there. Enough to make anyone with half a brain uncomfortable. I closed the tab and checked my phone. 6:03 from Ethan Carter. 2 from my mother, Elaine Carter. 1 from a number I didn't recognize but could already guess. I didn't return any of them. By 9 a.m., my father, Robert Carter, called from his private number. He only used it when he wanted to control the narrative. "Hannah," he said, voice clipped. "We need to talk." "I'm working," I replied. "It's Sunday." "So is fraud," I said, and let the silence stretch just long enough to register. "You had something to do with this," he said. It wasn't a question. "I do my job," I answered. "You taught me that." He exhaled sharply. "You couldn't wait 1 weekend." I looked out the window at the slow-moving traffic below. "No one waited for me," I said. He didn't respond. Then, quieter, "Do you understand what this does to Ethan?" There it was. The axis everything rotated on. "I understand what it does to the truth," I said. "If that's inconvenient, that's not my responsibility." He hung up without another word. At 11:15 a.m., Claire Whitman posted her wedding photos. Smiles, white dress, soft filters, comments already pouring in. "Congratulations, beautiful couple. Perfect day." I scrolled past them without stopping. By noon, the second article appeared. This one, more explicit. Names spelled out, dollar amounts listed. Allegations of concealed assets and breached fiduciary duty. The comment section was brutal, in the quiet way only adults can manage. No insults, just questions. At 12:27 p.m., Daniel Ross emailed, "Media inquiries coming in. Say nothing. You're covered." I replied with a single word. Understood. Then my phone rang again. This time, it was my aunt, Linda Carter, my mother's sister, the one who used to slip me cash at holidays and whisper, "You're smarter than all of them." "Hannah," she said, voice unsteady, "what is happening?" I considered deflecting, then didn't. "The truth," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "Your mother told people you weren't invited because you were struggling." I closed my eyes. "I know." "I believed her," Linda said. "I'm sorry." "It's fine," I replied. And for once, it was. By mid-afternoon, the narrative my mother had spent years maintaining was unraveling faster than she could repair it. Because lies depend on silence. And silence was gone. At 3 p.m., Ethan finally got through. "What did you do?" he demanded, skipping any pretense. "I did my job," I repeated. "You knew this would happen." "Yes, and you let it happen anyway." I waited. "You ruined Claire's family," he said. "No," I replied evenly. "They ruined themselves. I just documented it." His voice cracked. "This is my marriage." "And I was your sister," I said. "You made your choices first." He hung up. That evening, my mother sent a group text. "We need to come together as a family right now. This is not the time for division." I stared at the screen. Division had been their strategy long before this. I didn't respond. Instead, I went for a walk. The air was cold, clean, honest. I walked until my thoughts slowed into something manageable. When I returned home, a new email waited in my inbox. From Claire Whitman. Subject: "Please call me." I didn't. At 9:46 p.m., Thomas Whitman called again. This time, I let it go to voicemail. "Hannah," his voice said, measured but strained. "I understand now that you're more involved than I realized. I think it would be in everyone's best interest to discuss this privately." Privately. The word people use when public truth becomes inconvenient. I deleted the voicemail. At 10:30 p.m., Daniel texted again. "They're asking if you'll testify if it goes that way." I replied, "If subpoenaed." That was the only leverage I needed to give. I slept deeply that night. No dreams. No rehearsals of conversations that would never happen. Monday morning brought consequences. My mother's book club canceled their weekly meeting. 2 members posted vague messages about integrity and honesty. My father's golf invitation with a local judge quietly disappeared from the calendar. Ethan stopped returning calls from Claire's family, and my name began circulating in places it had never been spoken before. Not as a problem, as a professional. At 2 p.m., Daniel called me into his office. They offered a settlement, he said. Early. Generous. Conditional. Conditional how? They want the report sealed. No testimony. Quiet resolution. I leaned back in my chair. And the widow won't agree unless everything is disclosed. I nodded. Good. Daniel studied me for a long moment. You know this will get ugly. It already was, I said. It was just private. That night, my father showed up at my apartment, unannounced, uninvited. I watched him through the peephole before opening the door. He looked smaller than I remembered. Older. His suit rumpled, his certainty gone. "Hannah," he said, trying to step inside. I blocked the doorway. "What do you want?" I asked. "We need to talk," he said. "We've talked my whole life," I replied. "You just never listened." He swallowed. "You didn't have to do this." I met his eyes. Calm, unmoved. "Yes," I said. "I did." Behind him, the hallway was quiet. Neutral. Witnessing nothing. "This isn't over," he said. I nodded once. "I know." I closed the door gently, locked it, and leaned against it for a moment longer than necessary. Because the truth is, this was only the middle. The wedding was done. The silence was broken. And the part they were most afraid of hadn't happened yet. The part where everything they'd hidden would be said out loud, in rooms that mattered, by people who didn't care who my family thought they were. And that was coming next. Power doesn't disappear when it's challenged. It changes tactics. By Tuesday morning, the tone shifted. The calls stopped. The text softened. Concern replaced accusation. Like a costume change no one thought I'd notice. My mother, Elaine Carter, left a voicemail at 8:03 a.m. "Hannah, sweetheart, I've been thinking a lot. We should sit down, just the two of us. No lawyers, no tension, just a conversation." Just a conversation. Another phrase I'd learned to decode. It meant explain yourself until we're comfortable again. I deleted the message without listening to the end. At work, the Whitman case had grown legs. Legal teams multiplied. A second civil filing appeared. This one from a former subcontractor who'd noticed irregularities years ago, but hadn't known where to take them. Once one person speaks, others remember what they swallowed. Daniel Ross called me into his office mid-morning. "You're becoming a name," he said, not unkindly. "Reporters are connecting dots." "I didn't leak anything," I replied. "I know, but you don't have to. Competence attracts attention." He slid a folder across his desk. Another matter, unrelated. Or maybe not. Inside was a preliminary request from a probate attorney in DuPage County, Carter Family Trust. I didn't touch it. "Why is this coming to us?" I asked. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Your grandmother." My stomach tightened. Margaret Carter, my father's mother. The only adult in my childhood who'd ever asked me real questions. The one who used to say, "You see things other people miss." "She passed away 3 weeks ago," Daniel continued. "Apparently, the will is being contested." 3 weeks ago. The same week my parents told me not to come to the rehearsal dinner. No one had told me she'd died. I stared at the folder. "Contested by whom?" "Your father," Daniel said, "and your uncle. Against the named executor." "Who is?" Daniel met my eyes. "You." The room went very still. "That's not possible," I said. "She never told me." "She didn't need to," he replied. "The will names you, primary executor, sole discretionary authority over distribution pending review." I sat back, breathing evenly, feeling the weight of 10,000 memories rearrange themselves. Margaret Carter had always been quiet, observant. The kind of woman who watched how people behaved when they thought no one important was looking. "What's being contested?" I asked. Daniel flipped a page. "Your father claims undue influence. Says you manipulated her in her final years." I let out a short breath that almost passed for a laugh. "I spoke to her twice a month," I said. "He saw her on holidays." Daniel nodded. The irony is not lost. I didn't respond right away. I thought of the last time I'd seen my grandmother, 6 months earlier. She'd held my hand, looked at me for a long moment and said, "Don't let them tell your story for you." I understood now. By noon, my phone rang again. This time, from a private number I recognized immediately. "Hannah," my mother said, skipping pleasantries. "Why didn't you tell us about your grandmother's will?" I closed my office door. "Why didn't you tell me she was dead?" I asked. Silence. "That was your father's responsibility," she said finally. "You're her daughter-in-law," I replied. "You posted wedding photos. You couldn't send a text?" "She didn't want to fuss," Elaine said. "You know how she was." I knew exactly how she was. She was precise. "And now you're the executor," my mother continued, voice sharpening. Do you have any idea how that looks? Yes, I said calmly. It looks like she trusted me.
You're tearing this family apart, she snapped.
No, I replied. I'm just not holding it together for you anymore.
She hung up.
That afternoon, the probate attorney, Samuel Price, called me directly. Miss Carter, he said, your grandmother was very specific. She anticipated resistance. I wasn't surprised. She included documentation, he continued. Letters, notes, records, dated. My throat tightened, just briefly. What do I need to do? I asked. Nothing yet, he replied. Just be prepared. This won't stay private. Nothing ever did. By Wednesday, the rumor mill had shifted focus. The wedding scandal was still alive, but now it had a sequel. Inheritance. Favoritism. A granddaughter no one talked about, suddenly holding the keys. My father called again. This time, he didn't bother pretending. You will step down as executor, Robert Carter said. This is inappropriate. It's legal, I replied. It's embarrassing. There it is, I said. He lowered his voice. You think this is some kind of victory? No, I answered. I think it's responsibility. He scoffed. You've always wanted to punish us. I paused. No, I said slowly. I wanted to be included. You're the ones who taught me what exclusion looks like. He said my name like a warning. Hannah, think carefully. Families remember things. So do records, I replied. Goodbye, Dad. I ended the call. That night, I opened the folder Daniel had given me. Inside were scanned letters in my grandmother's handwriting. Neat. Slanted slightly right. One was addressed to me. Hannah, if you are reading this, then I have already seen enough to know the truth will not be welcomed. Do not argue. Do not explain. Simply do what is right. They will call it betrayal. It is not. It is clarity. Love, Grandma M. I sat there for a long time after reading it. The next morning, a process server showed up at my office. Notice of intent to contest the will. My father wasn't backing down. Good. Because neither was I. By Friday, the probate court date was set. Preliminary hearing. Closed session. For now. 2 battles, 1 wedding, 1 will. Different fronts, same truth. They had spent years making sure I had no seat at the table. They'd forgotten something important. I knew how tables were built, and next week, I would decide who sat where, whether they liked it or not. Courtrooms have a particular kind of silence. It's not peaceful. It's restrained. A pause thick with expectation, where every word is weighed before it's allowed to exist. The probate hearing was scheduled for 9:30 a.m. the following Wednesday in DuPage County. Closed session. No press, just lawyers, documents, and people who believed their version of the story mattered more than the facts. My father, Robert Carter, arrived early. I saw him through the glass wall outside the courtroom, speaking in low tones with his attorney, Charles Benning, a man who'd represented our family for decades. The kind of lawyer who knows where the bodies are buried, because he helped choose the cemetery. My mother, Elaine Carter, sat beside them, posture rigid, eyes fixed forward. She didn't look at me when I took my seat across the room. I was 31 years old, wearing a navy suit I'd bought for depositions, not family confrontations. My attorney, Samuel Price, sat calmly to my right, shuffling papers with deliberate slowness. The judge entered. Judge Helen Morales, early 60s, known for efficiency and little patience for theatrics. Let's proceed, she said. Charles Benning stood first. Your Honor, he began. We are contesting the validity of the will of Margaret Carter on the grounds of undue influence exerted by the named executor, Hannah Carter. Undue influence. The phrase landed exactly where it was meant to. Samuel Price rose next. Your Honor, the decedent was of sound mind, fully informed, and deliberate in her decisions. We will demonstrate not only the absence of undue influence, but a pattern of neglect by the contesting parties. Judge Morales raised an eyebrow. Proceed. What followed was not dramatic. It was surgical. Samuel introduced letters. Dated. Signed. Handwritten notes documenting conversations my grandmother had recorded after family visits. Notes about who called, who didn't, who asked about her health, and who asked about assets. My father shifted in his seat. Then came the medical affidavit. Margaret Carter's physician confirming her mental clarity up until her final week. Then the financial logs. Transfers she'd made independently. Charitable donations my parents had never known about. Judge Morales looked at Robert Carter. Mr. Carter, how often did you visit your mother in the last year of her life? My father cleared his throat. We spoke regularly. That wasn't the question, the judge said. How often did you visit? Silence. Elaine's hand tightened around her purse. Samuel Price stood again. Your Honor, we'd like to submit Exhibit F, the letter, the one addressed to me. I felt the room tilt slightly as it was read aloud. Do not argue. Do not explain. Simply do what is right. Judge Morales listened without expression. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair. This court finds no evidence of undue influence, she said. The named executor will remain in place. Contest denied. Elaine gasped softly. My father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Court adjourned. No applause. No vindication. Just consequence. Outside the courtroom, my father stopped me. This isn't over, he said, his voice low, urgent. It is for today, I replied. Elaine stepped forward then, eyes bright with something between anger and panic. You enjoy this, she said, making us look bad. I met her gaze evenly. You did that yourself. We parted without another word. That afternoon, Daniel Ross called. You're going to be deposed in the Whitman case, he said. Defense wants to establish bias. Of course they do, I replied. Be ready. They'll try to paint this as personal. It isn't, I said. But I won't pretend it didn't start somewhere. That night, Ethan texted me for the first time in days. Dad's furious. Mom's not sleeping. You could stop this. I stared at the message. Stop what? The truth? I typed back. I didn't start it. His reply came slower this time. You could make it easier. I set the phone down without responding. By Friday, the will decision had leaked. Quietly. Through the same channels my parents used to curate their image. A cousin called. An old family friend sent a cautious email. The tone had changed. People weren't asking what I'd done. They were asking why Margaret Carter had trusted me instead of her own son. On Saturday morning, Samuel Price emailed me a list of estate assets. One line stood out. Carter Holdings, LLC. I frowned. What is that? I asked when we spoke later. A shell, he said. Inactive. Or so it appears. Appears? It hasn't moved money in years, Samuel said. But it owns property. What kind? He hesitated. A commercial building in Aurora. Fully paid off. Never disclosed to your parents. I closed my eyes briefly. My grandmother hadn't just chosen me. She'd prepared me. That afternoon, I drove to Aurora. The building was unremarkable. Brick. 2 stories. A small sign in the window. Available for lease. I stood across the street, hands in my coat pockets, studying it. This wasn't about money. Not really. It was about foresight. Margaret Carter had known exactly what kind of family she was leaving behind, and she'd left me more than an inheritance. She'd left me leverage. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hannah Carter, a woman's voice said. This is Melissa Grant from the Chicago Tribune. I'm calling regarding both the Whitman case and your recent appointment as executor. I smiled slightly, though no one could see it. Yes, I said. What would you like to know? The silence that followed was brief, but telling. The story was spreading, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being talked about behind closed doors. I was the one deciding what would be said out loud, and who would hear it next. By the time Monday morning arrived, my name had stopped being a rumor and started becoming a reference. Not famous, not notorious, something quieter and more dangerous. Credible. Melissa Grant from the Chicago Tribune didn't waste time on pleasantries when we met at a coffee shop near my office. She arrived with a recorder, a legal pad, and the kind of calm that comes from knowing the story will stand on its own. I want to be clear, she said, setting the recorder down, but not turning it on yet. I'm not interested in family drama. I nodded. Neither am I. I'm interested in systems, she continued. Money, power, silence, and the people who benefit from it. That was something I understood. We talked for an hour. I answered what I could, declined what I couldn't. I didn't speculate. I didn't editorialize. I explained processes, timelines, documents. When she finally turned the recorder on, she asked one question that mattered. Why you? I considered it. Because I didn't need to be liked, I said. I need it to be accurate. She smiled slightly. That's usually the answer. By the time I left, I knew the article would be careful, which meant it would land harder. At the office, Daniel Ross called an impromptu meeting. Legal, PR, senior partners. This story is going to connect threads, he said. We don't interfere. We don't deny. We let facts exist. One of the partners glanced at me. Are you prepared for what comes with that? Yes, I said. What I didn't say was that I'd already lived with worse. That afternoon, I received notice of the deposition date in the Whitman case. 2 weeks out. Enough time for the defense to strategize. Enough time for my family to panic. Ethan called that night, not angry, not accusatory. Careful, Hannah, he said. Can we meet? Why? I asked. I just want to understand, he replied. I thought of every time I'd tried to explain myself and been waved off. Okay, I said. Tomorrow. Lunch. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown. Neutral territory. No memories attached. Ethan arrived early, already seated, hands clasped tightly on the table. You look tired, I said. So do you, he replied. We ordered, then sat in silence for a moment longer than necessary. I didn't know, he said finally. I know, I replied. He frowned. That's it? That's enough. He leaned forward. Dad says you're enjoying this, that you're punishing us. I met his eyes. Dad says a lot of things. This is blowing up, Ethan said. Claire's parents won't talk to us. People are asking questions. My job. I know, I said. You married into a family that was hiding something. That's not your fault. His shoulders sagged slightly. But it's my problem now. Yes, I said gently. It is. He looked at me. Really looked. Like he was seeing me without the familiar lens of inconvenience. You could help us, he said. How? Say something. Downplay it. Tell people this is overblown. I shook my head. I won't lie. He stared at his plate. You never used to be like this. I smiled faintly. I always was. You just never needed me to be. We ate quietly after that. When we stood to leave, he hesitated. Are you coming to Thanksgiving? He asked. It was March. We'll see, I said. That night, my mother showed up again. This time, she didn't knock. I opened the door to find her standing there, coat half-buttoned, eyes sharp with urgency. You're talking to reporters, Elaine Carter said. Yes. You didn't think to warn us? No. She stepped inside without waiting for permission. This family is under scrutiny, she said. People are connecting things. The will, the wedding, the lawsuit. They should, I replied. She turned to face me. Do you want us ruined? I considered the question carefully. No, I said. I want you honest. She laughed, a short, brittle sound. You think this is honesty? Airing everything out? I think this is reality, I said. You just aren't used to it. She shook her head. You're cold. No, I corrected. I'm done begging. Her eyes flashed. You've always resented Ethan. That's not true, I said. I resented being invisible. She looked away then. Just for a moment. We did our best, she said. That's what people say when they don't want to be accountable, I replied. She left without another word. 2 days later, the article ran. Not on the front page. Not with a screaming headline. It didn't need to be. It laid out timelines, names, patterns. The connection between a public wedding and a private filing. A grandmother's will. An accountant who happened to be in the middle of all of it. The comments were measured. Thoughtful. Uncomfortable. People don't like seeing how families protect themselves at the expense of the inconvenient. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Colleagues. Old classmates. A woman I'd worked with years ago who wrote, I always wondered why you stayed quiet. So had I. That evening, Daniel called. You handled this well, he said. There's interest. In what? You, he replied. A federal investigator reached out. Informational interview. I closed my eyes briefly. About the Whitmans and potentially others. I nodded. When? Soon. After we hung up, I sat alone in my apartment, the city humming softly outside. For years, I'd thought my power was in staying unnoticed, in not rocking the boat. I'd been wrong. Power was in knowing where the cracks were, and being willing to stand there calmly while everything shifted. My phone buzzed again. A text from my father. We need to talk. This has gone too far. I looked at the message for a long time. Then I typed back. No. This has gone exactly far enough. I set the phone down because the next part wasn't about my family anymore. It was about institutions, records, consequences. And once those wheels start turning, no one gets to decide when they stop. Not even the people who taught you to stay quiet in the first place. The interview with the federal investigator happened on a Thursday morning, 2 floors below my office, in a conference room that smelled faintly of old carpet and institutional coffee. Her name was Rebecca Sloan, Assistant U.S. Attorney, early 40s, no wasted motion. She didn't ask me how I felt. She didn't ask about my family. She asked about money. "Walk me through how you spotted the pattern," she said, clicking her pen once. So I did. I explained the timing of transfers, the shell entities, the consulting fees that never consulted. I showed her spreadsheets, reconciliations, the way numbers repeat themselves when someone thinks they're clever. Rebecca listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded once. "You realize this doesn't stop with the Whitmans," she said. "Yes. You're comfortable with that?" I thought of my grandmother's letter, of my parents' insistence on appearances, of the years I'd spent being quiet so other people could stay comfortable. "I'm comfortable with the truth," I said. She closed her notebook. That's usually enough. When I returned upstairs, Daniel Ross was waiting in my office doorway. "How'd it go?" he asked. "They're interested," I replied. He smiled faintly. They usually are when someone brings receipts. That afternoon, I received formal notice. Deposition scheduled. Public record. My name listed as a material witness. There was no pretending anymore. By Friday, my father stopped calling. Instead, he sent a letter. An actual letter. Typed. Signed. It accused me of betrayal, of airing private matters, of choosing strangers over family. I read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it in the same folder as my grandmother's notes. Context matters. Ethan tried one last time. He showed up at my apartment that evening, standing in the hallway like he used to when we were kids and he'd broken something. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "Good," I replied. "I'm tired." He stepped inside, looking around like he was seeing my life for the first time. The books, the framed certifications, the quiet order. "You built all this," he said. "Yes, without us." He didn't say it out loud, but it hung there between us. "I didn't know how bad it was," he said finally. "I know," I replied. "You could still help me," he said, "at least with Claire, with what's coming." I considered him carefully. "I won't lie," I said, "but I won't hurt you deliberately." He nodded. "That's more than fair." Before he left, he hesitated. "Mom's not doing well. I hope she gets help," I said. He looked at me, searching for something softer. "I mean it," I added, "just not at my expense." After he left, I stood by the window for a long time, watching lights flicker on in other apartments, other lives, other families. The deposition came the following Tuesday. I wore the same navy suit, the same calm. The defense attorney tried to provoke me, suggested bias, asked about family conflict. I answered with dates, documents, facts. At one point, he asked, "Isn't it true you were excluded from the wedding?" "Yes," I replied. "And you don't believe that influenced your actions?" "No," I said. "The fraud influenced my actions." There was no comeback to that. By the end of the day, I knew the case was bigger than any of them realized. When I got home, a voicemail waited from Samuel Price. "Hannah," he said, "you should know. Your parents are requesting mediation regarding the estate." Mediation. The word people use when power shifts, and they want a controlled environment to regain it. I didn't call back right away. Instead, I opened my laptop and reviewed the Carter Holdings LLC documents more closely. The Aurora building wasn't just an asset. It was leveraged against a quiet loan, one my father had co-signed years ago and never disclosed. Margaret Carter had known. She'd waited. I closed the file. The next morning, I agreed to mediation, not because I wanted reconciliation, because I wanted clarity. The session was scheduled for the following week. Neutral office, professional mediator, no reporters, no judges, just truth, stripped of audience. The night before, my mother sent a final message. "Please don't do this. We are still your family." I typed back, "You should have remembered that first." At the mediation, my parents sat together. United. Tense. I sat alone. The mediator, a woman named Karen Liu, laid out ground rules. Respect. No interruptions. My father spoke first. "We believe Hannah has acted vindictively," he said. Karen turned to me. "Your response?" "I acted lawfully," I said, and quietly, until I was forced into public view. Elaine's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't force you." I looked at her. "You told people I was unstable," I said. "You excluded me. You lied." Karen held up a hand. "Mrs. Carter, is that accurate?" Elaine didn't answer. The silence said enough. By the end of the session, nothing was resolved. But something had changed. They weren't in control anymore. As I left the building, my phone buzzed. A message from Rebecca Sloan. "Grand jury convening. I'll be in touch." I smiled faintly. Because the story my family tried to bury had grown beyond them. Beyond weddings and wills and whispered explanations. It had become something solid, something official. And there's a particular kind of peace that comes when you realize this. You don't need revenge when accountability shows up on its own. You just need the courage to stay standing when it does. And I was still standing. The subpoena arrived on a Monday. Certified mail. Thick envelope. No drama in the delivery, just weight in the hand. The kind that tells you, this isn't theoretical anymore. I signed for it, set it on my kitchen counter, and finished making coffee before I opened it. I'd learned that rushing toward things that matter doesn't make them come faster. It just makes you sloppy. Grand jury testimony. Date. Time. Federal building downtown. This wasn't about the Whitmans alone anymore. I called Daniel Ross after reading it once. "They're moving," he said. Quietly, but decisively. I figured. "You still good?" I looked around my apartment. The same chair, the same window, the same calm I'd built piece by piece. "Yes," I said. "I'm very good." By noon, my parents knew. I didn't tell them. Someone else did. Someone always does. My father left 3 voicemails in an hour. The first, angry. The second, controlled. The third, careful in a way that made my skin prickle. "Hannah," Robert Carter said in the last one, "this is bigger than you understand. You don't want to be on the wrong side of this." I deleted all 3. The irony was almost generous. For most of my life, I'd been told to stay out of things I didn't understand, to trust people who knew better, to accept that discomfort was the price of belonging. Now the same people were afraid of exactly what they dismissed in me: precision, patience, memory. The night before my testimony, I didn't rehearse answers. I reviewed documents, dates, transfers, paper trails that didn't care how anyone felt about them. Sleep came easily. The federal building was colder than I expected. Not physically, emotionally. Everything designed to neutralize personality. Beige walls, flat lighting, chairs that discouraged comfort. Rebecca Sloan met me outside the room. "No speeches," she said. "Just answer what you're asked." "I know," I replied. Inside, the questions were direct, methodical. "Who assigned you the case? What did you find? When did you realize the scope extended beyond the initial filing? Did anyone attempt to influence your findings?" "No," I said. "They attempted to influence my silence." A pause. Then writing. I was dismissed after 90 minutes. When I stepped back into daylight, my phone buzzed with a message from Samuel Price. "Your parents' counsel is requesting an emergency meeting." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back, "No." That afternoon, Melissa Grant's article was followed by another. Smaller outlet. More pointed headline. "Family ties and financial crimes. When silence breaks." This time, my parents' names were printed in the context they feared most. Not villains, enablers. That distinction matters to people who care deeply about reputation. My mother called that evening. Not angry, not tearful, quiet. "Hannah," Elaine Carter said, "I don't recognize you anymore." I leaned against the counter, the phone warm in my hand. "You never tried," I said. "That's not fair." "It's accurate," I replied. She inhaled shakily. "We did what we thought was best." "For who?" She didn't answer. "I needed you," she said finally. "This family needed you." "No," I said gently. "You needed control." The line went silent, then disconnected. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. The next few days moved quickly. The Whitman case expanded. Subpoenas multiplied. A former accountant flipped. Emails surfaced that turned whispers into structure. Claire Whitman stopped posting. Ethan texted once. They're saying Dad knew more than he admitted. I stared at the message. Did he? I didn't respond, because some realizations aren't helped by commentary. On Friday afternoon, Daniel stopped by my office again. There's an offer on the table, he said, from your parents' counsel. They want to settle the estate dispute quietly, transfer certain assets, no admission of wrongdoing. I almost laughed. They already lost, I said. Yes, Daniel agreed, but they want to save face. I shook my head. I won't trade truth for comfort. Daniel studied me. You know that means this will get uglier. I know, I said, but it will also end. That night, I went back to Aurora. The Carter Holdings building looked the same. Brick, unassuming, empty. I unlocked the door using the key Samuel had given me earlier that week. Inside, the space smelled faintly of dust and old paper. Potential. Nothing flashy, just solid. My grandmother had chosen well. I walked through each room slowly, imagining what it could become. Offices, a nonprofit, something useful, something that didn't exist just to impress. I understood then that this wasn't about inheritance. It was about intention. She hadn't given me things. She'd given me direction. On Sunday morning, a final message arrived from my father. We can still fix this. Come home. Let's talk like a family. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee untouched, and typed my reply carefully. I am not coming home. I am not angry. I am not confused. I am exactly where I need to be. There was no response, and for the first time, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space, because the truth had done what it always does when it's finally allowed to breathe. It separated what was real from what was performative, and I was done performing. One chapter remained, not the loud one, the final one, where consequences settled in and something new had room to begin. I didn't know exactly how it would look yet, but I knew this: I would not disappear again. Consequences don't arrive all at once. They come in waves, quiet notifications, calendar changes, invitations that never come back. 2 weeks after my grand jury testimony, the first real shift happened. My father resigned from the advisory board of a local foundation he'd served on for 12 years. No announcement, no farewell email, just his name quietly removed from the website, like it had never been there. That mattered to him more than anything else. The Whitman case moved into a phase that no longer needed me at the center. Enough evidence had surfaced that prosecutors didn't require my presence to keep going. Others were stepping forward now. Former employees, consultants, people who had waited for permission to speak and finally realized they didn't need it. Claire Whitman filed for an annulment. That detail came to me secondhand, through Daniel, who heard it from another attorney over lunch. Timing's tight, he said. Grounds are misrepresentation. I nodded once. Ethan didn't call. Not that day, not the next. Silence again. But this time, it was different. It wasn't imposed. It was chosen. At work, something unexpected happened. Daniel asked me into his office late one afternoon, shut the door, and leaned against his desk. We're restructuring, he said. New compliance division. Internal investigations. I want you to lead it. I didn't answer right away. Title? I asked. Director, he replied. Budget. Team. Authority. And the catch? There isn't one, he said. You've been doing this work anyway. We're just naming it. I accepted. Not because it felt like victory, because it felt aligned. That night, I walked through my apartment and noticed how little of it had anything to do with my family. No photos, no heirlooms they'd chosen. Everything here was intentional. I liked that. 3 days later, my mother showed up again. This time, she looked tired in a way I'd never seen before. Not performative exhaustion. Real. I heard about your promotion, Elaine Carter said, standing in my doorway. Thank you, I replied. She nodded, then looked down at her hands. People don't call anymore. I waited. They ask questions, she continued. About your grandmother, about the lawsuit, about things I don't have answers for. I imagine that's uncomfortable, I said. She flinched slightly. I don't understand how it got this far, she said. I met her eyes. Because you never wanted to understand me, her shoulders sagged. I thought if I kept things orderly Everything would be fine. There's a difference between order and control, I replied. She was quiet for a long moment. Your father may be indicted, she said softly. I know, I replied. She looked up sharply. You know? Yes. And you're okay with that? I considered the question. I'm okay with the truth, I said. Whatever that means. She nodded slowly. I don't know who we are without the image. That's something you'll have to figure out, I said. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just stood there, realizing for the first time that I wasn't something she could manage anymore. When she left, I didn't feel relief. I felt resolution. A week later, I received official notice. My father had been named in a separate inquiry related to the Aurora property. The loan, the shell entity, the thing my grandmother had anticipated. He called that night, not to accuse, not to demand. Hannah, Robert Carter said quietly, I didn't think it would end like this. I leaned against the window, watching the city lights blink on. It didn't have to, I said. I was trying to protect the family. No, I replied. You were protecting your position in it. He exhaled slowly. I wish you'd come to me sooner. I almost laughed. I did, I said. For years. You just weren't listening. The call ended without goodbye. That weekend, I went back to Aurora again, this time with an architect. A woman named Lena Morales. Practical, sharp, no interest in appearances. We walked through the building together. It has good bones, she said. You thinking nonprofit? Yes, I replied. Financial literacy, legal aid, something useful. She smiled. Your grandmother would like that. I didn't ask how she knew. Some things are obvious. On Sunday night, Ethan finally texted. I'm moving out. Staying with a friend. I read the message twice, then typed back. I hope you find some peace. He didn't reply, and that was okay. Because this chapter of my life wasn't about reconciliation. It was about separation. Clean lines. Clear boundaries. I stood in my kitchen late that night, thinking about how many years I'd spent waiting for my family to change. They hadn't. But I had. And that was enough. There were still things left to settle. Legal processes don't move quickly. Neither does healing. But the direction was set. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. One chapter left. The one where everything quiet finally made sense. The indictment came quietly. No flashing headlines. No cameras outside anyone's house. Just a docket update buried among hundreds of others. Filed on a Wednesday afternoon. United States versus Robert Carter. 2 counts. Financial misrepresentation. Failure to disclose material interests. I found out the way I'd found out about most things lately. Through a neutral email from Daniel Ross, forwarded without commentary. I read it once, then closed the file. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel grief. I felt gravity. That evening, my father didn't call. Instead, he sent a single text. I understand now that you won't save me. I stared at the words longer than I expected to. Then I typed back. I was never meant to. There was no reply. The next few weeks moved in an odd, suspended way. Not slow, not fast, just deliberate. The nonprofit paperwork for the Aurora building progressed. The name was approved. Carter Ledger Project. Financial literacy and legal navigation for people who didn't know where to start, or who'd been told they didn't belong in rooms where decisions were made. The irony wasn't lost on me. I hired 2 staff members, one former public defender, one compliance analyst who'd left a corporate firm after reporting misconduct no one wanted to hear about. We didn't talk about my family. It wasn't relevant. At work, my new role settled into place. Meetings, budgets, strategy. Authority that came without needing to raise my voice. People listened, not because of fear, because of clarity. Melissa Grant emailed once more, asking for a final comment on a follow-up piece. I declined. Not everything needs a quote. Thanksgiving came and went without an invitation. I spent it in Aurora, unpacking donated desks and folding chairs with my team, ordering takeout Chinese food, laughing about nothing in particular. It was the first holiday I could remember that didn't feel like a test. A week later, Ethan called. I almost didn't answer. Old reflex. But I did. I'm in therapy, he said. No greeting, just the fact. That's good, I replied. I keep thinking about things I didn't see, he continued. Things I didn't want to see. I listened. I don't know what to do with all of it, he said. That's not something I can solve for you, I said gently. I know, he replied. I just wanted you to know I'm not pretending anymore. That mattered more than any apology he could have given. My mother didn't reach out at all. According to my Aunt Linda, Elaine Carter had retreated, sold some jewelry, left committees, stopped hosting. People who build their identity on being admired don't always survive anonymity well. I didn't feel guilty about that. I felt finished with it. One evening in early December, I received a letter, handwritten, from my mother. It was shorter than I expected. I am starting to understand that loving someone doesn't mean shaping them into something comfortable. I don't know if I know how to be your mother the right way. But I see now that I was never listening. I don't expect forgiveness. I needed you to know that. I folded the letter and placed it with the others, not as evidence, as context. I didn't respond, not because I was angry, because sometimes the most honest answer is silence that isn't punishing. It was just complete. On a cold morning in January, I stood outside the Aurora building as the new sign was installed. Clean lettering, simple. No family name larger than the mission. A reporter showed up briefly, local, curious. Why this? She asked. I thought for a moment. Because too many systems depend on people staying quiet, I said. And quiet is expensive. She nodded, scribbled something, and left. That afternoon, I received a calendar notification. Sentencing hearing, my father's case, scheduled for March. I didn't plan to attend. That choice surprised some people. It didn't surprise me. Closure doesn't always require a front row seat. Sometimes it just requires distance. That night, I sat alone in my apartment. Lights low, city quiet beneath the windows. I thought about the girl I'd been in my 20s. Capable, careful, always bracing. She'd believed that if she explained herself clearly enough, someone would finally understand. She'd been wrong. Understanding didn't come from explanation. It came from boundaries, from action, from choosing not to disappear when things became inconvenient. I checked my phone. A message from Lena Morales. Permits approved. We can open officially next month. I smiled. One chapter left. Not about them. About me. And what comes after you stop trying to earn a place in rooms that were never built for you in the first place. The opening day of the Carter Ledger project wasn't dramatic. No ribbon cutting, no speeches, no press release carefully worded to impress anyone. Just a door unlocked at 8 a.m. on a gray Tuesday and a handwritten sign taped to the glass that said, "Walk-ins welcome." The first person through the door was a woman named Teresa Holloway, 57, recently widowed, holding a manila folder like it might dissolve if she loosened her grip. She didn't know what she needed. She just knew something was wrong with her husband's pension paperwork, and everyone she'd called had told her to hire a lawyer she couldn't afford. We sat at a folding table. I listened. I asked questions. I didn't rush her. 2 hours later, she left with a plan and a referral, and the kind of relief that doesn't show up loudly, just quietly straightening someone's spine. That was when I knew the project would work. By noon, 3 more people had come through. By the end of the week, we had a waiting list. I didn't tell my family. I didn't need to. In March, my father was sentenced. 18 months, white-collar minimum, no spectacle. I read the summary online, the way you read an obituary for someone you already mourned years ago. Ethan texted afterward. "It's done," I replied. "I hope you're okay." He sent back a single word. "Trying." That was enough. I never went home. Not for closure, not for explanations, not for appearances. Instead, I built something that didn't require permission. The nonprofit stabilized within 6 months. Grants came in. Small ones at first, then larger. The kind that arrives when people realize you're not performing integrity, you're practicing it. I hired more staff, expanded hours, added workshops. On my 32nd birthday, I worked a full day and went out for Thai food with colleagues who knew me only as who I was now. No one forgot the date. No one compared me to anyone else. Late that night, alone in my apartment, I opened my grandmother's letters one last time, not to reread them, just to sit with the fact that she'd seen me clearly, long before anyone else did. My mother never asked to visit. She sent one more message in April. "I hope you're well," I replied. "I am." And I meant it. Here's what I learned, if you're still listening. Revenge doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like opting out of the roles that were designed to keep you small. Justice doesn't always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it shows up as paperwork filed on time, questions answered honestly, and systems that finally reflect reality instead of reputation. And family doesn't get to define you just because they were there first. They get one chance to know you. After that, the work speaks. I don't hate my parents. I don't carry that weight. I don't excuse them either. I simply stopped allowing their version of me to outrank my own. If you're in the middle of your own long silence, building something while everyone else looks the other way, hear this. You don't need to announce yourself. You don't need to wait for an invitation. You don't need to explain your worth to people who benefit from misunderstanding you. Build anyway. Document everything. Choose yourself early, or you'll spend years untangling yourself later. And when the moment comes, when the truth finally has room to stand up straight, don't flinch. That's not revenge, that's self-respect. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like it. Comment if you've ever been the one no one expected anything from. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. There's another one waiting, and this time, you won't be invisible.